Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz.
Hi.
All right, so I'd like to start off with a very personal experience that I just had recently. As you know, on January 12th, my grandfather passed away. He was of Frankfurt, German descent, and 2 days later, an incredible story broke out across international news. A pendant that was identical to Anne Frank's pendant had been discovered in the Sobibor concentration camp. Now, it turns out that that necklace belonged to a little girl whose name is oddly similar to your wife's, Carolina Cohen. She was from Frankfurt, just like Anne Frank herself and my grandfather. And it turns out she is related to us. An armchair genealogist of sorts named Chaim Motzen traced her family roots and ended up finding dozens upon dozens of family members of ours spread across the world. Well, fast forward, and I just recently met 30 long-lost relatives of mine in Frankfurt. We all gathered in the city for a memorial for Carolina and the rest of her immediate family, our family that had been murdered in the Holocaust, and a Stolperstein was actually laid in front of the last home she lived in voluntarily before she was brutally taken away by the Nazis. Now, this story has been all over the news, and I myself will be releasing some very personal video coverage of the entire event next week, but I'd like to talk to you about the relevance of this entire story. When I was in Frankfurt, reporters kept on asking me, why is this story relevant to what's happening in our world today? It's been 70 years since the Holocaust. Is this really pressing news? Well, I'd like your take on that very question.
Well, I had a similar, not as dramatic experience when my wife, my daughter, and I went to Poland a year ago or so to speak at Jagiellonian University. I hired a Polish guide who had done research on my family, and I discovered also that a beautiful 16-year-old young woman named Dershowitz, a cousin, had been taken as a sex slave by the Nazis and then brutally murdered. And her brother had been a secretary at Auschwitz and then also brutally murdered. And when you hear about this, even if it's years and years later, and you can identify a personal member of your family, it really makes it clear there, but for the grace of God and the foresight of my great-grandparents coming to America in 1889 and 1906, respectively, go any members of my family, my daughter, my cousins, my friends. The Holocaust is so personal to every Jew. As Elie Wiesel said, Jews were not the only victims, but all Jews were the victims. And of course, Hitler's goal was to come and kill Jews in England and America and Palestine. And fortunately, he was stopped. But when you hear a story like the one of your family, it's so poignant and touching. It is also necessary because the survivors are quickly passing away, and we need reminders, and we also need proof and evidence of the Holocaust. One would think that one would not need proof any more than one needs proof of slavery in the United States, but the Holocaust denial industry is rampant and thriving. I get Holocaust denial emails every single day from neo-Nazis, from anti-Israel people. One hears it today on college and university campuses. One hears it today from Jews like Gilad Atzmon, a fifth-rate musician in England who believes that there was questions about whether the Holocaust occurred, but he does believe that Jews killed Christian children and used their blood to bake matzah. These are the stories that circulate today on university campuses. Gilad Atzmon was invited not so long ago to play his music and present his positions at the Friends School in New York that educates our future leaders. And so we do have to keep the memory alive. It's a cliche to remind us what was said by the philosopher, those who forget the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. But we as a Jewish community can never afford to repeat the lessons of history that came over us. And we won't repeat it because now we have Israel. Israel is a strong country. Strength is crucial to Israeli survival. Hashem oz li'amo yitain, Hashem yivorech et amo b'shalom. God will give the Jewish people strength, and only then will the Jewish people have peace. That's a message we should never forget strength is a prerequisite to peace. Strength is a prerequisite to survival. No Jew should ever be embarrassed about using strength, military strength, political strength, economic strength, moral strength, academic strength, to remind of the Holocaust and to preserve the nation state of the Jewish people.
Now, what I'm interested in knowing about is how do you think this story relates to what seems to be a rising movement of white supremacy, right? White supremacists in the United States that many claim is emboldened by U.S. President Donald Trump.
No, I don't think we see a rise in white supremacy in the United States. White supremacists are marginalized. They have no influence on college campuses. They do not pose a threat to American Jews. White supremacists pose a major threat in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovakia, in Greece, in France, where it was pushed back a bit, and then a similar threat by left-wing, I wouldn't call them white supremacists, but anti-Zionists and people who tolerate anti-Semitism, is posed by the elevation of Jeremy Corbyn, who may conceivably be the next prime minister of England. Imagine, for the first time in modern history, an anti-Semite, anti-Zionist being the prime minister of a major American ally, a major country, Great Britain. Balfour would be turning over in his grave, and so would so many of the great prime ministers of England, from Disraeli to the current prime minister. So we live in dangerous times, and we have to be concerned about the rise of white supremacy and the rise of neo-nationalism and the rise of fascism all through Europe. We don't have to be concerned about that to any great degree in the United States. We have the institutional structure to defeat it. They have no influence today in the American media, American television, or in the American political system.
Now, let's turn to another breaking story, one that you mentioned yourself, Professor Dershowitz, that is very relevant to what we have just discussed. Poland, or should we say Polish Independence Day. Tens of thousands of nationalist demonstrators marched through the streets of Warsaw to mark Polish Independence Day, an estimated 60,000 people to be more exact. But what should have been a moment of unity became one of division. Tons of demonstrators were chanting "Pure Poland, White Poland," "Refugees get out," and offensive slogans about Jews. Now, today there are less than 10,000 Jews in Poland. In fact, 90% of Poland's Jewish population was wiped out during the Holocaust. So, Professor, where is this coming from?
Well, Poland historically has a very mixed history when it comes to Jews. It was a place where Jews lived happily, maybe not so happily, for many, many hundreds of years, including my forebears, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, came from shtetls and towns in Poland. But there was a long and deep history of religiously based anti-Semitism. The Polish Catholic Church, headed by racists and bigots like Cardinal Glemp, promoted anti-Semitism. And the Catholic Church, at least some of the members of the Catholic Church, played a role in turning Polish people, Polish Catholics, against Jews during and after the Holocaust. When I was in Poland recently speaking at Jagiellonian University, they were considering a law that would make it a crime to state that there were any Polish people complicit in the murder of Jews. And I went out of my way as a speaker from America to make sure that I said that there was Polish complicity, that during the war, Polish people burned down a church with Jews in it. A book was written about it. Following the war, this is probably the worst example, the Jews of Kielce were murdered in cold blood after an incitement by Catholic priests and others to murder the Jewish remnants. And many Jews who came back to Poland to try to regain their property after the end of the Shoah were threatened or injured or killed. So Polish history is deep with dark aspects of it. And the Catholic Church has changed its views now and has become far less anti-Semitic all over the world, including in Poland. But there are still residues of extreme nationalists and neo-Nazis who are in Poland, and those are the ones who come out and demonstrate. And we have to give no pass to them. They have to have zero tolerance, particularly in a place like Poland, for any show of anti-Semitism or extreme nationalism of the kind that we saw during this demonstration. The Polish government was critical of the people who made those statements and issued those slogans. but were they critical enough? That's not clear. I think more attention has to be paid to the rise of neo-Nazism in all parts of Eastern Europe today.
And anti-Semitism seems to be rising across Europe. We're seeing record amounts of terror attacks in the, or anti-Semitic attacks in the United Kingdom, and now reportedly in Germany as well. What can this be attributed to in your mind?
Well, there are three kinds of anti-Semitism that we're seeing in Europe. We're seeing Islamic extremist anti-Semitism. Those are responsible for most of the physical murderous attacks that took place in France and other countries. That's blatant neo-Nazi type Muslim extreme anti-Semitism. That's also combined with anti-Israel and anti-Zionism. Second, we're seeing the old nationalism, the kind we've talked about in Poland, kind of neo-Nazis, real right-wingers. Some of them actually support Israel, but they hate Jews. That can't be acceptable. No matter how much they support Israel, anti-Semitism has to be called out. And then the relatively new phenomenon, represented by Jeremy Corbyn, the hard left toleration of anti-Semitism and sometimes facilitation of anti-Semitism. That may be the most dangerous because it represents the future, not the past. It represents what young people on college campuses are saying. It represents what may become the next prime minister of Great Britain. So we may see over the next decade anti-Semites as prime ministers in a number of countries in Europe, in England from the left and in Eastern European countries from the right. The Jews have always been caught between the black and the red, the black of fascism and the red of communism. Jews in Israel thrive at the center, and we have to use all of our influence to try to move politics back to the center and away from the extremes of both right and left.
All right, Professor. Well, turning to a topic related to Israeli public relations, in case you didn't know, most Israeli soldiers celebrate being discharged from the military with a big post-army trip around the world. Now, get this. 410,000 Israelis between the ages of 20 to 24 go abroad each year. If you think about it, that's a potential for creating a public relations army in of itself. And that's where our next guest comes into the picture. Reserve Captain Eyal Biram has helped found a unique program to harness that manpower, and he's here to tell us all about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Eyal.
Hello, hi.
So tell us a little bit about this program that you have just started.
Yeah. So actually, I discharged from the military just a few months ago. And during my service, when I was an officer, me and two of my friends from a unit founded an initiative. The idea is real simple. There is a lot of 10,000 of IDF soldiers that finish in the army, and they have one big dream to travel the world, to meet people, but they are not prepared to speak about Israel. They are not prepared to know why it's so important and why it's the...
Well, they probably don't even know that that's something that they're going to have to deal with when they're abroad, right?
Yeah. They don't know what they are going to deal with, and they don't know what is the potential of meeting people from all over the world and giving them the, let's say, show them the nice and the beautiful faces of Israel around the world. So we set together 3 friends, and we understood that we are need to take responsibility for that situation because nobody had already taken it. And we published this, we founded and we started this program last year. We already had thousands of soldiers that already had in our program, and we are now escorting soldiers that are abroad. And
I understand that 7,000 soldiers have already been trained in this program's first year, and a whopping 5,000 more were trained just last month. So you guys are really moving ahead with this. You're collaborating with the IDF, right?
Yeah, we're working in collaboration, high collaboration with the Defense Ministry and the IDF, and each one of the Israeli soldiers today, before he finishes in the army, will join part of the Israeli workshops, Israelis workshops. And today, when we are meeting soldiers, we are talking with them firstly about the knowledge, because they don't know, they have a lack of knowledge, why it's so important to speak about Israel. And afterwards, they don't have any communication skills, how they can, let's say, how they can engage the situation, and they can show, they can tell the stories, they can show the experience about the personal stories and about the army experience and everything. And when you think about the numbers and the meetings, and we know today that each one of the soldiers are meeting 5 people when they are abroad, mostly 5 people that I will have, let's say, a long conversation and the opportunity to show them my personal story, the things I'm thinking about Israel, and it's really simple and it's going very, very good because all of the soldiers we already met want to take part in the program, and in the future, in the short future, we are planning to be part of one of the Israeli national program that each one of the Israeli would like to take part in.
So is the idea to just only train people who want that training, or to kind of implement it into the army and make it a required training?
Yeah, today is a mandatory workshop that each one of the soldiers have to take part of it, and this is just the first mission. The other mission is to escort the travelers when they are abroad, because they have a lot of questions, we'll ask Professor Dershowitz, and they have a lot of questions, and they need our help. And the message for the soldiers is really simple. It's not really important if you are believe in the right solution for Israel or the left side. We are everyone and all of the soldiers love Israel. It's important and the images of Israel is important. And because of that, they have to know how the small conversation can make the change for Israel image.
Professor,
but I would go much further than that. I think it's a terrific idea, Yael, and I want to help out in any way I can if I can help talk to some of these people. But I do think that you have to do more than just talk to 5 people. I think if you have thousands of Israeli soldiers, or as articulate as you are and experienced as you are, coming around the world, they should be speaking at high schools and colleges and universities and answering the lies of Break the Silence and other soldiers who come and just state one side and exaggerate that one side against Israel. Your folks are people who've been on the front lines, have experience, and you're young, and you would be very attractive to college audiences. So I think it's important that when Israelis travel the world, it's arranged for them in advance to speak to several hundred people on university campuses and describe the experience and talk about how you don't represent left or right, that you represent just generally support for Israel's right to thrive and Israel's right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people, speaking up against the BDS movement and against other efforts to delegitimate and demonize Israel. So I think you can expand what's already a terrific program. Instead of every Israeli soldier meeting 5 people, why not have every Israeli soldier meet 500 people and speak in front of them and make the case, what I call the 80% case. Don't get into the issues that divide the Israelis. Get into the issues that unite the Israelis and make the common case for Israel at American universities and high schools as well. It's important to make the case in high school. And I think the folks would enjoy it very much, going from college to college and high school. It doesn't mean they should, deny them the opportunity to go out and have a good time and see parts of the world. But, to spend a day a week during their trip at a university, I think would be very, very productive, and it would help make their trip very fulfilling to them and have a big impact on the future of Israel.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I would like that you also, your ideas are terrific, and we are planning to expand the project in the future. And today, we just started with a potential, as I said, to change Israel image in the real idea, and it's not just a high, just something that really
if you dream it, it can happen. So you've more than dreamt it, you've organized it. Now you have to expand it. I think it's a great idea. I want to be as helpful as I can in bringing it to as many people as possible. So Mazel Tov, congratulations. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Eyal. I think it's super, super important what you're doing. As somebody who has traveled with a lot of these Israelis after the army, I know just how imperative it is to kind of present Israel from a non-political standpoint and get people to know we're also young people with a cool country. We have ice cream here. We have beaches. So good job. Kol hakavod. All right, and also for those of you who are interested in learning more about Israel, it's supported by the Abba Even Institute at the IDC, Herzliya, headed by Ron Prosor. So if you want more information or to help out, check it out. All right, now let's go to some of our viewers' questions. Our first video comes from Fonda, who cares passionately about politics. After watching one of our shows, Fonda, who coincidentally was born the day before you were in 1938, felt compelled to challenge one of your statements.
Sure.
Let's hear from her.
Good afternoon, Professor Dershowitz. My name is Fonda. I'm a South African living in Eilat. On a recent program, you were asked a question on what your thoughts were on a two-state solution. You replied it was the only viable one. You then said that Abbas was to blame for not wanting to negotiate. My question to you is, what's left to negotiate when Netanyahu continues building and expanding new settlements? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vanya. You're a day older than me, so I have to be respectful and defer to your seniority. But I don't think there's any inconsistency between wanting a two-state solution and Israel's current settlement policies. Israel has shown that it can pull back settlements as it did in Gaza. It will do so. Most of the expansion that we're seeing now in Israel is expansion up rather than out, expansion within settlements or in Jerusalem. I don't necessarily approve of those, but I don't think it undercuts the desire for peace. I repeat what I said, that until Abbas is prepared to say the following words, there won't be peace. I recognize Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. I accept two states for two people, as mandated by the United Nations in 1947. Abbas refuses to do that. But right now, I don't want to point fingers of blame. I would like to bring Abbas and Netanyahu together to the negotiating table. I know that Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt are working very, very hard on some new ideas involving peace processes. I want to be as helpful as I can. I think Israelis should be as helpful as they can. I hope and I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is very much open to the prospect of a two-state solution as long as the Palestinian state doesn't pose a danger to Israel. The security issues are paramount, and I hope we can come to some resolution. But I do not think that it's fair to blame Prime Minister Netanyahu or the settlement policy on the refusal. The Palestinians could have had a state in 1938, 1948, 2000, 2001, 2008. They turned it down every time. And yes, it's, I think, a little harder now because the conservative influences on Israeli politics. But the blame must primarily lie with Palestinian leadership, which refused to accept statehood. They never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I hope now both sides see this as a very good time for a peaceful resolution. I think if Israel were to make peace with the Palestinians, it would increase its opportunities to also make peace with the Sunni nations, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other countries who were united against Iran. So this is a perfect time for both sides to compromise. I hope it will happen.
All right, Professor, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for your time. And we also want to thank our guest, Eyal Biran. If you would like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.